So far, we've explored what motivates us, how we communicate, and how to better understand ourselves and others under stress. Tools like Maslow's hierarchy, Dan Pink's motivational theory, emotional intelligence, personality styles, and a general awareness of mental health disorders helps us proactively support mental well-being and build psychologically safe workplaces. Understanding demographics of the construction workforce is another aspect towards building healthier, more inclusive, and supportive job site environments. In this section, we'll explore who works in the industry and examine patterns in gender, race, ethnicity, country of birth, occupational roles, and education attainment. These data points aren't just numbers, they represent real people, each with unique experiences, stressors, and contributions. A person's identity and background can shape how they experience psychological safety, how they access mental health support, and how they respond to challenges on the job. For example, individuals who are underrepresented in their role or demographic group may face increased pressure or isolation or bias. Language barriers or lower levels of formal education might make it harder to find or use mental health resources. Sometimes rigid cultural norms can create silence around stress or emotional struggle. As we look through this material, consider how demographic factors influence well-being anywhere, especially in construction. This awareness is another practical tool in your leadership toolbox. And really, we're still only scratching the surface of what it takes to create a truly human-centered, psychologically safe construction workplace. So, why does demographic data matter in a course on mental health? Our first goal of the course is to create psychologically safe environments through trust, listening, and support. Our second course objective is to promote well-being and resilience in the construction workplace, while our third objective is to identify warning signs of mental distress, such as anxiety or depression. And then our fourth course objective is to understand construction-specific stressors and their effect on performance. So when we talk about our first goal, demographics is going to help us understand who is in the workforce by any kind of grouping, age or race or gender or anything. And there's many more than what I'm talking about here, to build inclusive environments where everyone feels seen and valued. Demographics, again, are going to help us to recognize how diverse life experiences, maybe cultural identities. Everybody comes from a rich culture and they can be so different and so beautiful. But those differences can also cause stressors that might affect mental health and needs on the job site. Demographics can also help us appreciate how stigma or language or cultural barriers may be different across demographic groups. And this requires, for us to address this, it requires us being attuned to kind of listening to the cultural or more background components of the people who work in construction. And then demographics also help us analyze factors like immigration status, maybe veteran background or union membership, and how those kinds of demographics can intersect with each other and then maybe lead or diminish vulnerability to stress and other situations that could cause either help or degrade psychologically safe environments. So what I want to start with is a study. I'm going to share a study with you that was conducted in 1972 by two psychologists, Bransford and Johnson. And first, I'm going to model the experiment, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. So here we go. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you'll arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that's the next step. Otherwise, you're pretty well set. It's important not to overdo things. That is, it's better to do too few things at once than too many. In the short run, this may not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, however, it will become just another facet of life. It is difficult to foresee any end of the necessity for this task in the immediate future, but then one can never tell. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again, then they can be put into their appropriate places. Eventually, this will be used once more, and this whole cycle will have to be repeated. However, that is part of life. So, this experiment was conducted with a large group of participants that was divided into 3 groups. 1/3 of the participants were read a paragraph. That's it, nothing else. After hearing it, most reported that it didn't make any sense, and later they couldn't remember anything about it, and it was kind of meaningless to them. And I'm sure right now you can empathize with that first group. In the experiment, another third of the participants were told that the paragraph was what they were told what the paragraph was about before they heard it. So these participants, completely different context, they knew what the paragraph was about. They were read the same exact paragraph. Those participants thought it made perfect sense, and they remembered a lot about it. The third set learned the topic of the paragraph after they heard the paragraph. These participants didn't think it made much sense, and like the first group, they couldn't remember much about it at all. So what I'm going to tell you now is exactly what this narrative is about. It's about doing laundry. And by the way, the homework's going to ask you for this answer. So here's your freebie answer for homework. This paragraph is about laundry. So now let's quickly read it again. So we're about laundry. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that's the next step. Otherwise, you're pretty well set. It's important not to overdo these things. That is, it's better to do too few things at once than too many. And in the short run, this may not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, it will become just another facet of life. It is difficult to foresee any end to the necessity for this task in the immediate future, but then one can never tell. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again. Then they can be put in their appropriate places. Eventually, they will be used once more, and the whole cycle will then have to be repeated. However, that's part of life. So what's the point of me sharing this story? Well, I have 2 reasons that I like to share this story. The first one is that I saw this done as an exercise in a class I took over 20 years ago. And to this day, I often stop myself and make sure that I'm providing context so that people can better understand me. I often, when I'm getting like starry-eyed looks, I wonder, did I adequately lay out the framework, the groundwork, the context for what it is that I'm talking about? And that skill has helped me a lot. So I wanted to share that with you because of that. But then the second reason is kind of a little bit more obtuse, but I think just as important. And it comes from this idea of customer focus. And one of these days, I'm going to do a whole class on customer focus. But in everything we do and say, we should have an understanding of who the customer is, meaning that who's using what it is that we're producing, whether we're producing a communication or we're trying to get an idea across, or we're producing a building or plumbing or dinner. right? Whatever it is that we're producing, there's usually a customer, someone that uses the results of our efforts. And so um, when you think about that in this context and the importance of giving context, it might be easy to figure out who it is you're trying to communicate like day to day because you're around them all the time and you have a better idea of their personality style or their background or their family life or their education, whatever, their experience, all of those things. But when we're talking about expanding who we're trying to communicate with, like communities in which we're doing work, or the enigma of our clients. The client wants this. Our trade partners and the people who are actually doing the work, the workers. You might have to look at demographics to figure out who is likely to be impacted by the decisions that we make. And by impacted, tying that more closely to why we're taking this class, we're kind of talking personally impacted. So if you choose or not choose to do safety signage on your job site in multiple languages, who might you be impacting? What if you pick one language over the other? Because like for example, in New York City, a lot of the carpenters are from the Ukraine and they speak Ukrainian. But then you go to another trade, and most of those people who are doing the work are Spanish speaking Hispanics. So if we only did site signage in English, we'd be leaving out those two groups. If we decided, oh, we're going to be really great and inclusive, and we're going to do signage in Spanish and English, that's awesome. But we left out the people who make up a big part of that project crew by not also doing signage in Ukrainian. So really understanding the demographic where you're doing work or who's going to be impacted in the work that you're doing is really important. And it's going to lead to other things. So that's why this first blush that I'm going to show you about demographics from the U.S. Labor Department it's not by any means exhaustive, not going to cover every single demographic group that's there. These demographic groups can be very different region to region, industry to industry. And so if you're really trying to put yourself in a place where you want to be mindful and support the mental health, well-being, psychological safety of as many people as you can, then these are examples of things to be paying attention to, and just making sure that your decisions are positively impacting the most people that you can. All right. So I'm going to share a little bit more about this concept. In a previous life, I taught a 2-day workshop on safety, culture, and mindset in construction. At the time, I was working for a national mechanical contracting firm and traveled across the country delivering this workshop to superintendents, foremen, project managers. One of the most powerful activities we did during that course grew and evolved over its 2-day span. At the very beginning of the course, before anybody came in the room, we set up each person's spot. And there has a paper, pen, water, candy, and these tokens, these wooden blank tokens. Everyone had one, and they just sat quietly in front of each person as we got started. About an hour into the course, we covered safety statistics. Then later, we added to the picture. We brought out several stacks of additional tokens. Each stack represented our company's own injury and fatality statistics from the past 10 years. We stacked them up nice and pretty so everybody could see maybe a little bit more of an extra visualization of what those numbers looked like
in real life. And this was a pretty powerful visual, seeing something off of paper and physically in real life really was a conversation starter, made a difference. So the conversation was all these people in our company had some kind of an accident on the job site, some kind of trauma that happened on the job site. Later, we asked each person to take their token and their pen, their Sharpie that they had, pick up their blank token and write down something. Write down a name. And so each person would go, and the name that they were to write down was someone that they knew personally who had been injured or killed on a job site. And so each person would write down a name. And then they shared the story. For me, Jeremy was a very young project manager on a job site in Miami. And he was in the trailer doing his normal thing, minding his own business. And the crane fell. The crane fell right onto the trailer and killed him and three other people that were in the trailer that day. Jeremy died more than 25 years ago, and I still see posts from his mother, Gloria, and his father, Randy, every year on his birthday, every year on the anniversary that he died. And all I can think about is the trauma that the family suffered and the trauma I suffered knowing Jeremy and being there just 2 weeks before, talking about the risks on the job. And we had known that that crane was over the trailer and had called it out as a risk, saying that that trailer should be in a different place. And so I wasn't the only one that felt this going through, and his parents weren't the only ones who felt this, who continue to feel this trauma. The people who approved that location of that trailer have still think about it and talk about it. I still have touch with the safety manager from that job, and this has still been something that's resonated with all of us. And so those kinds of conversations happened in our class, and they happened over the course of the 2 days. Sometimes people were ready to talk about it right away, and sometimes they weren't. But as the stacks grew more and more, here's Jorge, here's Doug, here's Roland, here's Ray, Tim, Albino, Corey, here's Robert, rest in peace. Here's Benny, rest in peace. And the more and more and more that we had people talking about these incidents, these injuries, these deaths, these people, the more and more the statistics became less of a number and more of a reality. And so as we go through these statistics that I'm going to be sharing with you, I just wanted to make sure that we never lose sight of the fact that behind every single number, every single chart, and every single graph that you're going to see today is a real person whose lives impacted not only themselves, not only the people they worked with, but their families, their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, and long, long after the incident. Mental health and well-being is not about a number. It's about the people. And I've kept these with me to remind me because while statistics are useful, they kind of desensitize us. And these are topics, safety and mental health and well-being are topics that we cannot afford to be desensitized to.
So why focus on demographics for mental health and well-being in construction? First of all, to increase awareness around job site diversity and the unique perspectives, stressors, and challenges faced by different groups. To support a deeper understanding of the people we work with and create a foundation of respect and empathy for each and every person. Remember, this whole course is about expanding our definition of mindfulness and mental health and to lay at least a groundwork for psychological safety and human connection in our industry in construction. So, the United States has 347 million people. 160 million of those people are full-time employed in non-farm payroll with non-farm payroll employment. There are 8 million of those people who are employed in the construction industry. Typical demographics, and like I said before, this is not an exhaustive list at all, but typical demographics supplied by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics include education, gender, age, race and ethnicity, union affiliation, and occupational group. So let's talk about these each in detail. So the construction industry workers are generally less likely to have attended college. You can see this is educational attainment by industry, race, and ethnicity as of 2020. So in 2020, over half, that's 56.4% of the construction industry workers had a high school diploma or had not completed high school. This is nearly double the percentage for the overall employed. Construction industry workers were less likely than the overall employed demographic to have obtained a bachelor's degree or higher. So 17.9% for the construction industry versus 41.4% for overall employed. With regard to race and ethnicity, 38.4% of Hispanics in the construction industry had less than a high school education, which is much higher than that for non-Hispanic Asians, Blacks, and whites. And then in contrast, 46.8% of non-Hispanic Asian construction industry workers had a bachelor's degree or higher. So that's almost the reverse. That's more than double the rate for all other race and ethnicity groups in construction. And just by the way, this data includes workers only of the age of 25 or older. So what's interesting about this, just one element that's interesting about this is that remember that anxiety disorders are the most common form of mental disorder, and education in construction provides a valuable context for mental health in our industry. A completely different study in 2016 found that almost 13% of adults with less than a high school diploma reported symptoms of anxiety compared to only 5% of those with a college degree. So that's a humongous difference. So what this is telling us is that statistically, people without a high school degree suffer from anxiety symptoms more than people with a high school degree. And then we just looked at statistics telling us vast percentages of people in the construction industry don't have a high school degree. So, or only have a high school degree. So right there, that's an indicator that anxiety disorders are going to run pretty high in construction just based on those two pieces of information. So it's a great kind of, if you were wondering why we went over disorders and anxiety disorders at the level that we did in our last lecture, this is why we did that, because that is a real issue in our industry, anxiety disorders, according to statistics. So now let's talk about gender a little bit. So 1 in 10 construction workers is a woman. Total employment in the construction industry peaked in 2007 at 11.9 million before kind of dropping again to 9.1 million in 2010. And that was in the wake of this, Great Recession. Some of you will remember, from about December 2007 to about June 2009. And then there were smaller declines through 2012. The employment industry grew after 2012, reaching 11.4 million in 2019. And then in 2020, as a result of COVID, employment dropped to 10.8 million. In 2020, women accounted for 1.2 million of those employed in construction. And so that's really about 1 in 10 construction people employed in construction were women. So what context does this demographic provide for us? Well, there's some interesting next steps in this conversation. So one of the things is about caregiving responsibilities. So in 2023, 62% of mothers reported career disruption due to caregiving, compared to 32% of fathers. And then here are some interesting facts. 1/6 of employed Americans, that's men and women, are also providing uncared care to adults. So when we talk caregiving, we're not just talking of children, we're talking of elders, elder care. 61% of elder caregivers are employed full-time. So 61% of the people who are responsible for elder care are holding full-time jobs. The caregiver part of their day, their week, caregivers of adults spend an average of 23.7 hours per week providing care. That is equivalent to a part-time job. In addition to that, nearly 70% of caregivers report emotional stress, and more than 50% of caregivers report physical strain. So if you've got a construction worker who's caring for an elder in their family, they might be on the job site 50, 60 hours a week, plus about 24 hours taking care of their parents or grandparents or whoever that might be, or their children. And then add to the normal pains and strains of doing a construction job, you're likely to get physical strain simply from the activities of taking care of an elder. These are like kind of staggering when you think about what this can mean to people who you're working next to every day, who may never have mentioned that they're taking care of their mom or their dad or their grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or whatever. And think too about how many people live with multi-generations in their homes now because real estate is so through the roof. How many more people are primary elder caregivers as well as child caregivers? It's just something to think about. 47.7% of women in the trades reported that they're held to a different standard than their male coworkers, that they face discrimination in many aspects of their work and sometimes contend with an unsupportive, if not hostile, work environment. So there was a very interesting study done in 2021, and these results that you're seeing here were the results to a question: what were or are your main reasons for leaving or thinking about leaving the trades? So the top reason was lack of respect or harassment. So 1 in 10, there's 1 in 10 women in the construction industry, and 47.2% of those 1 in 10 women report that they're thinking of leaving the trades because of lack of respect or harassment. 40.7% of those 1 in 10 women talk about a lack of prospects for promotions or advancement. 38.8% said problems I raised weren't taken seriously. 37.8% difficult finding stable work or not enough hours. 36.6% lack of opportunity to build full skill set, low quality training. 33% difficulty finding childcare. 32% health or injury concerns. This one, 32.9%, got tired of yelling culture and disrespect. 27.5% safety concerns. 26% isolation. 21% I wanted something different. 19% long hours, working time. I went back to school or college and work is physically too hard was at 13%. So this is so interesting. And I would say that I would guess, maybe ignorantly, that you could look at this list and say that I'm sure that men have very similar concerns, and that it's not necessarily that these concerns wouldn't also be reflective of men in the construction industry, but it is interesting to look at this from the lens of women in the industry, and then you look at how many of these could be related to kind of caregiving, right? Whether it's elder care or child caregiving. And then you can just see the possible causal relationships starting to arise. So this is very interesting to me from a statistic / demographic perspective. And then when you add on to it the mental health aspects of the stresses that these can cause, and the anxiety about being able to take care of those safety needs, right? Maslow, you've got the physiological needs. There's some here, safety concerns. You've got social needs going on here with isolation, the yelling. There's a lot of things. Each one of these could be easily classified into one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well. So those were gender demographics. Now, how about age demographics? So this data tells us that our workforce is aging. So you can see that this one is showing us the percent of industry employed by age, and we've got in construction is in the blue lines, and in all industries is in the red lines. So people aged 16 to 24 years, those are the solid lines. So 16 to 24 years old, those lines are sitting there at the very bottom of the graph. Then when you look at the next age group, 25 to 54 years old, those are the top end. Those are kind of started around 75% and kind of moving to, I don't know, 60% of the workforce is in that 25 to 54-year-old age group. And then you can see that the 55 plus age group, the kind of dash line with the little dots in there, those are on the rise. Those are on the rise to about now hovering just below 25% in all industries and in construction. And so you can see that the data is showing us that our workforce is aging, and it's aging pretty quickly. And at the same time, younger workers are underrepresented in job sites. And this creates kind of a twofold challenge. Like, how do we support older workers who may be kind of quiet, struggling with physical and emotional fatigue, while also making space for younger workers who need to feel valued and heard and safe as they enter into this high pressure environment? And this matters deeply in our course objectives. Creating psychologically safe environments means that people of all ages feel respected and included and able to ask for help. And promoting mental well being means noticing when stress or anxiety might be connected to, in this case, we're talking about these demographics, to age related issues like retirement fears, generational communication gaps. The caregiving comes into play here again, or concerns about relevance, like, am I still relevant to the industry, or I'm not relevant yet to the industry, or the industry is changing so fast, how do I keep up? Or I've been doing this one job for the last 5 or 6 years. I want to switch jobs. How do I become relevant to that switch? So all of these factors, when you look at them through the lens of age, lead to some really important thinking. Um, our job as leaders isn't really to treat everyone the same. It's to treat everyone fairly and with awareness. And as we go through this next section, think about how the age distribution in your own job site or future job site could affect team dynamics, trust, and performance. And then think about what would it take, what really would it take to create a workplace culture where both 20-year-old apprentice or a 20-year-old fresh out of college or a 20-year-old straight out of trade school and a 60-year-old foreman or master estimator, master scheduler feel equally valued and mentally supported. These are all kind of the thoughts that that hopefully are being sparked through this class. Have a look here. When we're talking about now age groups, divide, stratified is such a great word, means like categorized by ethnicity. So when you look at Hispanics, so the Hispanic people in construction, they follow the trend with 25 to 54 years old, but they've got quite a lot fewer 55 plus people, Hispanic people in construction. We've got in the Asian, non-Hispanic Asian grouping here, we've got a very small amount of people between 16 and 24. And then, but that, when you look at the education demographic, that almost makes sense because they might be entering the workforce a little bit later because of the education that that demographic seems to do more of. And then, but Asians then have the largest number of people over 55 who are working in construction. So all of these, when you start to really pay attention and look at kind of similarities and differences, what does this mean? Like, how do you make sure, depending on the demographic blend in your organization, as you get higher and higher up in leadership roles, how do you use demographics like this to help build a culture that can meet the needs of your specific demographic? So even if you can't see a way to use this information now, that doesn't mean that you'll forget in the future that the information is out there and that you can use it to make better decisions going forward. So now we're going to talk in more detail about race and ethnicity, and then born status. Born status is interesting. It means, what country were you born in? And because we're talking about U.S. statistics, we're going to be talking about it in the context of people born in the U.S. and then people not born in the U.S., kind of regardless of specific ethnicity. So let's look at some of this information here. So as we continue to kind of go through demographics, you've got to talk directly about race and ethnicity, because it's not just check boxes on a form. It's not just like that little form that we fill out when we get a new job somewhere. There are social realities to the influence of people's experiences, their opportunities, their stress level, the resources that are available, and sometimes their mental health. So let's start with a key fact. In 2020, Hispanic workers made up nearly 1/3, 30% of the construction industry, even though Hispanics were only about 18% of the total US workforce. So what that means is that construction is one of the most Latino concentrated industries in the country. But here's where we need to dig a little bit deeper and look at another visualization here. So among Hispanic construction workers, over 75% are in construction and extraction roles. So that's that first one up there. So the blue bar in the first grouping of charts there, those are the Hispanic workers. And you can see that they are predominantly in construction and extraction roles. Those roles are typically very physically demanding, much more high risk, and are often the lower paying jobs in the construction industry. Now, when we looked at that chart on age, remember I said that the group of people between over 55 is the smallest one. Well, maybe that's because most Hispanics are working in construction and extraction, and they aren't able potentially to work as long as other ethnic groups who aren't working in such physically demanding parts of the industry. You can compare that to non-Hispanic white workers who are more likely to be in management or business roles. And this then, comparing the occupational group across ethnicities, then that starts to open up the door and build some more awareness for us about maybe some structural barriers, like who gets promoted, who gets trained, and who gets heard. And so these are just, we're making general statements here, but they're things to think about. So when people don't see themselves represented in leadership, or if they feel excluded because of some demographic characteristic, whether it's gender or sexual orientation or race or accent or background or what they bring to the site at lunch, that can seriously affect psychological safety. And it can create environments where people don't speak up, where they don't report concerns, where they internalize stress. So let's look at born status now. So where you're born isn't trivial. It's about understanding lived experiences and challenges that people bring with them into the workplace. And how those experiences might impact mental health, trust, communication, and other psychological safety factors that we've talked about on the job. In 2020, 1 in 4 construction workers, that's about 25%, were foreign born, so not born in the US. And that's significantly higher than the overall US workforce. So in the overall US workforce, there's about 16% of people who are foreign born, but it's 25% in construction. So we have a lot of immigrants who are working in construction. The industry depends heavily on immigrants, and many are coming into environments where they may or may not feel welcome or supported. And so let's take even a closer look here. Let's try to get this in here. So the majority of Hispanic workers in 2020 were foreign born. That's the dark blue line is foreign born, and the green line is native born, native to the US. Just over 2/3 of Hispanics in the construction industry were foreign born, while less than half of all employed Hispanics were foreign born. And interesting with the Asian population in construction, 62.5% of the construction industry workers who are Asian were not born in the US, compared to 68% for the overall employed. So these are really interesting numbers when you think about how to onboard new people. What if it's their first job in the US? What does that mean? Maybe language is so important, but just think about the regulatory requirements in the US. They differ. They're different from other countries, absolutely. They differ region by region. The requirements for just simple, not simple, but important PPE could be vastly different than what someone who may be very experienced in construction would have experience with when being in construction in a different country. And so all of these things that can just inherently bring additional differences, can that exact variety that makes diversity so strong can be also a thing that has a detrimental effect with feelings of isolation, lack of communication, lack of understanding. You've got language barriers, you've got culture barriers. So these are all things to be paying attention to as you're looking around and trying to be mindful and building inclusive environments where everyone can be psychologically safe. Turns out that workers born in the US earn a heck of a lot more than people who work in construction who were not born in the US. And that is true across all industries. That's not just construction. It's true across all industries. Among full-time wage and salary workers, people who are born in the US when compared to people who were not born in the US for both construction and the nation overall, there's a difference. It's about $1,000 for US born workers versus about $786 for foreign born workers. We should pay attention to the differences in earnings as it reflects a variety of factors, including variations in the distributions of native-born versus foreign-born workers by education status, and even people who have acquired advanced degrees in other countries besides the US. Those degrees are not always recognized in the US or given the same level of respect as a degree that was earned in, say, the US versus in another country. Occupation, industry, and geographic region, those all impact wages. In addition, earnings data for 2020 reflect the effect of steep pandemic-related job losses too. So this data excludes like incorporated and self-employed people as well. So when you're looking at, possible impacts, again, Maslow comes to the forefront here. We're talking about wages, which means we're talking about the ability to provide food, shelter, medical care, right? Those are the physiological needs. Already, people in in all industries in the US, and particularly in construction, there's a difference in wages for people who are foreign born versus born in the US. Those physiological needs then are more of a struggle. Then you have the next level of needs. I don't know why I'm always forgetting the next level of needs. It's physiological, and then it's safety needs. Those two go hand in hand so much. So yes, money makes a difference. And yes, whether you're born in the US or you're born in a different country, these are all things to be sensitive to as we're looking to be mindful. Okay, we've done education, we've done gender, we've done age. Now and race and ethnicity, let's look at union affiliation as a demographic. So you might be wondering why we're looking at union stats in a course on mental health and psychology, but the answer to this lies in the course objectives. Remember, our primary goal is to explore how to create these psychologically safe environments, and that means places where people feel safe speaking up, sharing concerns, and asking for help. Another objective is to promote mental well-being and resilience, especially in high-pressure construction environments. So now think about what a union actually does. A union can advocate for better working conditions, for better pay, for better benefits, health benefits, for more predictable hours, and job security. That's what a union does. All of these things reduce stress and support a worker's ability to take care of their mental and physical health. That's why this data matters. So the first chart here is showing a decline in union membership in the construction industry. So the green line on this chart is the construction industry, and the blue line is all industries, union affiliations. And so you can see that by far, the construction industry has more union members, but it's declined. So in 2003, no, in 2003, the beginning of the chart, 8.2% of private wage and salary workers were union members. But by 2020, that share has declined to 6.3%. Construction workers are more likely to belong to a union, but union membership in construction has also declined over the same period. For all race and ethnicity groups, construction workers were more likely to be union members and in the construction industry. So non-white Hispanics are most likely to be union members. Interesting, given that the demographic for Hispanics in the construction industry is the largest, but non-Hispanic white demographics are most likely to be union affiliated with unions. You can see then too that Asian workers tend to be the lowest number of people who are affiliated with a union in both all industries and in construction. Now, let's have a look again at wages. And so when you look at wages of union workers versus non-union workers, you can see a big difference here. So the pink lines are talking about all industries, and the purpley blue lines are talking about just construction. So look at how the median weekly earnings are different for union versus non-union workers. There's quite a significant difference here. The difference, if you do a little bit of calculation for 2019 between non-union construction workers and union construction workers, the difference is about $250 to $300 a week. You multiply that times 4 weeks in a month, that's about $1,000 a month that a union worker who are predominantly white are earning over the non-union workers. So 1,000 times 12 in my math is $12,000 a year difference between union workers and non-union workers. So these things get really interesting when you start comparing and thinking about like across the charts and looking and saying, wow, well, there's a definite there's got to be a correlation here and there and the next place. And when you start to look at across all of these demographics, you've got think about how education plus representation because you belong to a union plus the type of work that you're doing, whether it's the really physically demanding jobs versus less physically demanding jobs, the age in the industry, these are all things that should be kind of starting to swirl around in our minds and really challenging us to be like, oh my goodness, there is a big difference to just say that construction workers are stressed out. That's not enough. There's more to it. There's a huge tapestry beneath each of these. And then when you start talking about the vulnerabilities to mental health issues across each segment and each sector, it really brings it makes the idea of mindfulness become so much more tangible to me than just kind of this, yes, I need to be a more mindful leader. It's like, well, wait, there's a lot more to it than just saying that. There's more to think about and there's more to really pay attention to if we're truly serious about helping each person have an environment where they can, well, I'm going to pull on Dan Pink here, with autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you're thinking about how you as a leader can do that, can build environments in which people can be motivated, it means that you can't treat every single person exactly the same. You can be fair, you can be honest, you have the same standard operating procedures, the same expectations, the same consequences for good and poor behavior. But we need to be picking our heads up and looking around and truly asking ourselves, am I contributing to an environment that is fair, that is allowing and encouraging diversity? Am I helping to facilitate opportunities for others? There's a saying that says all ships rise with the tide. These are all the ships. And so if we all want to rise with the tide, then we've got to be paying attention to how each ship floats on the water. So occupational group. So I just want to give you quickly on this slide that we've got two charts that we're going to look at here, and I'm going to get into these a little bit more. So when you look at occupational group, we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but it bears some further looking. So over 3/4 of Hispanics in construction work in construction and extraction operations. We talked about that before. In 2020, 76.3% of Hispanics and 61.7% of non-Hispanic Blacks in the construction industry were employed in construction and extraction operations. That's the first set of bars there on the left. These shares were higher than those for non-Hispanic whites and non-Hispanic Asians. By contrast, non-Hispanic white and non-Hispanic Asians in the construction industry were more likely to be in management, business, and financial operations occupations than Hispanic or Black counterparts. In 2020, 14.1% of non-Hispanic Asians in the construction industry worked in computer engineering and science occupations, and that's the highest share for any group. You can also see by kind of trade on the right. So total construction, we've got construction laborers. So Hispanics and non-Hispanic whites seem to be a little even there. carpenters, there's more non-Hispanic white people in carpentry. Managers other than construction managers, that blue line is awfully large, and you can see how small the Asian line is. Um, construction managers, electricians, first line supervisors, painters and paper hangers. Those that looks predominantly Hispanic. Plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. Definitely, those are more white. HVAC integration mechanics and installers, mostly white, and construction equipment operators, mostly white. If you look at those kind of the across the job types, the construction occupations, you can right away tell that there is an unequal distribution in the highest paying trades in the industry. And it's just obvious there, plain as black and white, or blue, orange, green, and purple. So that's really what I wanted to share with you about demographics, and really trying to pull together what the statistics show, and give some maybe insights, food for thought about what those statistics can mean to what we do every day in construction, and how we lead, how we follow, how we plan as we get higher and higher up in organizations. How do you build strategy? How do you build your succession pipeline? How do you build your training plans? How do you build career paths? These are all questions that paying attention to not only demographics across the industry, but demographics within your specific trade, within your specific organization. All of these kinds of pieces of information can impact those kinds of decisions that you make. So now we're getting close to the end. We've got this lecture and one more before the summer session ends. So I want to talk about the homework for just a second. So now I'm going to attempt to share my screen. All right, so these are the notes. I really hope that you guys are liking the detailed notes for the class. On you've got all of the charts. You've got all of the explanation that I gave. So let me get down to the assignment here. And the assignment is going to take us back to that survey, the survey that asked women, what were or are your main reasons for leaving or thinking of leaving the trades? I found this chart to be really interesting, and I really thought about it a lot. So we're going to do an assignment on it because I was very interested. So the main assignment is sitting here. Even though these results came from a survey of women in the trades, there's no reason to believe that these concerns wouldn't affect anyone. For this assignment, you will analyze these factors using Maslow's hierarchy of needs to understand how unmet needs may lead to disengagement or departure from the industry. Focus on at least two demographic groups of your choice. So we covered a whole bunch of demographic groups. There's more. I didn't cover everything. And so what I'm hoping to see is I already filled out a table for you. These are all of the dimensions that were asked. So the column here, lack of respect, lack of prospects for promotion, et cetera, et cetera. This left column aligns with the chart, all these things on the chart. And then we've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs going across the top. And I did one little example that is not specific to a demographic group, but you can fill that out based on your demographic group. So we've got a chart for your first selected demographic group, and the assignment is to determine which level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs does that feedback align with, and then how could it possibly manifest itself or be exacerbated based on the demographic group that you've chosen. So there's one chart for that, and then a second chart for, oh, this should say group 2, and then a second chart for your second demographic group. And then there are some reflection questions at the end. And that is all. So thank you all. And I hope you enjoyed thinking about this assignment, honestly.